now we have to start again, Matt, because I forgot to hit the record button. This is TV at its finest. All right, I'm Drew Neiser, and I'm your host of Elements of Marketing. This is element number 5, episode 5. We're on networking. I'm here with the fabulous networker, Matt Sweetwood, former president and owner of Unique Photo. Matt, how is it going?
We're doing great. Beautiful day today here in Morristown, New Jersey.
Awesome. Well, thank you for that destination. I am in New York today with much better technical capabilities than I had last week. So, Matt, we're talking about networking like we did in the book. Tell me a little bit about your overall approach to networking in the last few years.
I think that networking is one of those things, obviously, that everybody talks about. Everybody wants to network in all sorts of ways. But I think really the definitive statement about networking and the approach that I take is that networking is not something that you do. It actually is a lifestyle. And if you engage it as a lifestyle, you're going to be successful at it. In other words, it's not like, okay, I think next Tuesday I'm going to do some networking. Let me go show up. That's sure to fail. Networking is really about making it part of your life and looking for opportunities everywhere. That's the approach that I took. Certainly.
All right. So we're making it part of your life. How did you do that?
You just want to be out there in the world. I mean, even if you look at the way that we connect, right? So we met through the CMO Club.
Yes, we did.
And when you go to a place like that, there's a really diverse group of people. And in fact, as an owner, I'm sort of like on the side a little bit at the CMO Club because most of the people there, as you know, are CMOs. And so what you do is when you meet each person is you aggressively go out and see ways that you can interact. Like on paper, does it look like we would necessarily come together? No, but it turns out that we have a lot of common interests and a lot of common things. And so we've created the ultimate network, right? I joined the club. We became friends. We became in contact. I ended up in your book. I'm here on national TV with you today.
International.
Oh, international.
This is global. Yeah.
Excuse me. Right. So this is a perfect example of networking, right? So you wouldn't anticipate this. You wouldn't think of this if you sort of set out what's going to happen when I approach a place like the CMO Club. And I approach that everywhere I go. Sometimes I go into Manhattan and you'll go to a simple networking event. Or when I interact with people on a daily basis, you're always looking for an opportunity in which you can interact. And it doesn't always have to be a business interaction per se. Even if it's an interaction on a different level, you never know how those turn out. So as you can see, I'm sort of talking a lifestyle.
Well, so let's talk about this a little bit because one of the folks, some folks have a challenge when they think about networking that they're going to get used somehow. They might be a little afraid either to introduce themselves. And first I have to say, you're a giver. And I'm on global television, thank you, at the CMO Club event recently. Matt followed me around with his camera and generously took pictures of me, ridiculous and funny pictures of me with people who were in the book. And you just did it, and you just described it as an act of goodwill. And I was so grateful to you for that.
But don't you see that, first of all, I was actually hoping that you would pose with really pretty women. That was really the motivation. That didn't turn out because they all ran away from you.
Yes, that's true.
In any event, you see, that's almost really a networking opportunity too, right? Because I'm standing there with my camera. So I'm just an innocent helper. And if you interact with somebody, that's a chance for me to interact with them. I didn't necessarily consciously think of that, but that's another way to actually have an opportunity for me to network off of you.
Well, and I think the key point, and I was setting you up for, is it was a give to get scenario.
Yes.
You gave. You didn't ask to get anything,
no.
but opportunities arrive. And I think as a framework for networking, starting there, what can you do? And it's funny, you and I met, and I asked, could I interview you? And that was a give opportunity for me because I could post that interview and, you could get some exposure. And then it turned out I bought a camera from you too, by the way. Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
We did.
I want to just go back to one thing that you said previously about people afraid of getting used. There's something that actually comes from relationships from that. And the only person that can allow you to be used is yourself. So if you engage with someone and you think they're a pest or they're going to use you, you just very gently and politely don't engage them.
Right.
That's all.
Right. And how do you sort of, as you're going through a group of people, you're at an event and it's the first time. This is, I think you and I talked about this a little bit, but when
Yes.
you're at an event for the first time, how do you, how much time do you spend with an individual versus, oh, well, there might be 5 other people there that are interesting. Maybe I should try to meet them. How do you decide that?
I think, obviously it depends on how many people are in the room and how easy it is to maneuver around the room, but you try to touch everybody. One of the things that I always like to do is get there early. I'm not one of those people that has to be fashionably late. I mean, I like being fashionable. You notice the shirt with the collar, the whole bit. I like to be fashionable, but fashionably late doesn't work in networking. It's not the smart way to do. So what I try to do is I try to get there early so I can see the lay of the land, see what it's going to look like. And when you're there early, you have the best chance at meeting with people who are there because there's less people engaging and so on. And you get to find out who's running the place. One of the things I like to do is get there early and meet the person who's running the event. Smart. They're usually a little harried, but it doesn't matter. They're happy to see people show up, so they'll engage you.
Right, and you can almost in that way become a co-host because you were sort of there early.
That's right, and they know you, and then I always try to circle back to them at the end, ask them how they thought it went. They really appreciate that. But that beginning part is extremely important. At the end part is actually less important because people have had a little bit to drink, and they're getting ready to leave or go to dinner or do what they're going to do, or they're not as with it, and they've also been handled, over and over and over again. Right. That's another thing too that I want to mention is that when I go to networking events, I never drink. I'm not there to socialize. That's not. I am to socialize, but not like that.
That's a working a venue as far as you're concerned. So
that's right. It's work. It's one of my things when we've all been to conventions in Las Vegas. And it's always an enigma to me when people go to Las Vegas and they're out with their boss and their customers and they get posted at events. Well, you don't do it at a networking event either. If you really want to get something out of it, go drinking later. That's fine.
No problem with drinking. Just if you're on the job, it's probably not a good idea.
That's right. And you want to be sharp. You specifically want to be sharp because sometimes that person there's a nuance in something they say or something they do, and you can actually think of a way that you can actually make it work.
Interesting. It's funny. You and I take a slightly different approach when it comes to events. I tend to talk to a lot of people, but when I meet someone that I really like and I'll stay there a while because I have a much better chance of bonding deeply with one person than I do with 10 or 20.
I do that too. If the person is really somebody who I think I can connect with, I will spend more time with them. It's always an issue. Quality is always more important than quantity. Right. And there have been times I've gone through 3, 4, 5 people, and all of a sudden you meet with somebody who you're going to connect with, and you spend half the time with them. I've definitely done that.
And so, all right, so we've got get there early, don't drink, work the room, and then circle back with the host. What do you do in terms of sort of conversations and getting conversations started?
I usually like to start with something casual. But one of the things I like to do is I've got a lot of things going on in my life. So I don't like to sort of I'm Matt Sweetwood. I'm president of Unique Photo. I'm a member of the CMO Club. I go on national TV. I don't do any of that. Right. I like to be a little more mysterious, like the mysterious woman in the room. Right? Because I look just like some bald middle-aged guy.
Yeah. Yeah, that's how you
let them
mysterious woman in the room
find out about you.
All right. So how do you create that mystery? By not revealing that much about yourself?
That's right. They'll ask why you're there. What I try to do is actually look at what they do first. And then I try to talk about something, any one of the numerous assets that I have, that I think will relate to them.
Right.
I have a whole thing that I do on parenting. I have things that I do in marketing. I am a speaker. I have lots of things going on in my life. So you try to relate to them so that they feel like you're not using them, right? Because just like you don't want to be used, you don't want that person to feel like you're using them. So you try and relate to them, I think sometimes on a personal basis. I mean, if it's a direct thing, like they have a name tag or they have a business card that's right in your business, then it's easy.
So let's talk about the. It's funny. Having seen you introduce yourself several times when you owned Unique, you always had used exactly the same language. I run Unique Camera Store, the coolest and something is
Yeah.
right. How long did it? How important is having a sort of clear mission statement tagline like that in these networking circumstances?
I don't think in that environment you need to have that elevator pitch so smooth. It actually sometimes makes you sound a little phony. Where you've heard me do it is we're in a room with 300 people,
Right?
and you have 5 seconds or they start playing the music. So
Right.
you want to say something that's a little bit funny. And it's
Right.
funny when a guy like me gets up and says he's cool or the place I work for is cool. Nobody expects that.
Right.
But I think that being genuine and authentic is really the most important thing. I think people ultimately appreciate that. So whether it takes 5 seconds or 15 seconds, I think it's okay. I think if you're taking 30 seconds and 60 seconds, that's probably not so good.
Right. Get to the point. Get to the point. Yeah. And so let's have, it's funny. I was at an event the other night and I was working hard. I didn't know anybody there. And I would eventually get to the business card exchange. And it was with a young person. And I sort of looked at the business card and he volunteered it. And it surprised me that here we are in 2015 and we're still exchanging business cards.
I know. I have the same thing going on.
Right.
As a matter of fact, I had one of these digital moments. I got this card. It's from aboutme.com. I'm going to show it right there.
Nice.
Okay. Nice. So you open this app. I don't know how. Let me try to get it in focus here. I don't know. It doesn't look so in focus, but
it's all right.
But anyway, you got the idea. And I can actually send an intro to their phone or their email. And I have used that a couple of times. But yeah, business cards are definitely still in.
It's amazing. And I don't know if you do, but I do. I use Evernote and I scan them now. And if I said to the person, do you mind if we connect on LinkedIn? It'll automatically send them a connection message. But I ask first. And I think that's really tricky. And so let's talk about the follow-up of once you've met someone at one of these events. How do you typically follow up?
Okay, so I grab their business card and even if the person is a younger person, like you said, who's, let's say, below my level, if you want to say such a thing, I don't care. If the person is interesting to me, I always follow through. And unlike you, I don't ask for permission. I connect with everybody on LinkedIn. As you know, I'm a little bit of a LinkedIn hog.
Yeah.
I have a lot of connections and I publish a lot on LinkedIn. So I don't feel any problem with that. I would not connect with somebody on Facebook unless I established a personal connection with them and spoke to them. But I basically follow up on every person who I think that I can have a connection with. So I'll come back with, let's say, 20 business cards. I'll try to LinkedIn contact with all of them.
Okay.
And I will connect with whoever I think. And I also like to let it sit. I don't like to come back the same day or night and do it. The next day, I never let it go more than 1 or 2 days. And I try to write something pertinent to what we spoke about as I connect with them.
Right.
Not just connect and not do anything. I'll write them a note.
And that's a really good point because I was at a conference on Friday and Saturday, and by Thursday and Friday, and I met 75 people, right? And you have all these cards, and you're trying to sort them out. And the ones that I do remember, then we had a specific conversation. I will, in my LinkedIn connection, either message request or whatever, I will say, we met talking about this, blah, 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 because you really, I'm not one of those people who remembers a year later, oh, I met you at this event and you were wearing purple. That's not me.
Exactly. And you want to write something pertinent. You're actually looking to make business out of it. So of course you want to do something like that. But connecting on LinkedIn is always a very, very good way. People really appreciate that. I've never really had anybody object to me to sort of force connecting with them on LinkedIn. I've never had that.
I think that's fair. No, I'm more sensitive because I get a lot of spam requests on, people trying to sell. And I always know because I'll occasionally break my rule. Someone I don't know, I'll accept that. And then within 30 seconds, I'll get an email. Oh, hello, Drew. I wanted to sell you this.
Right. And they write you this long email. But that's what the delete function on
Well, you're right, and it took me a while to figure out how to disconnect with someone on LinkedIn, but I have figured it out. And I don't know if those people ever actually got the message, but within 5 seconds of their spam request to sell me something, I disconnected with them. That's the opposite of networking. That is simply saying, I'm here, buy my stuff. And
can I make a suggestion with that?
Yes.
I don't really care that they've tried to spam me. It's a little bit annoying to hit the delete button on the email that they send. But I don't disconnect with them because ultimately it's better. You're more likely to get people to connect with you if you have more followers. So disconnecting with them really doesn't help you. They can still contact you anyway. And it's sort of like an in your, I don't think you need to do that. But I mean, certainly if they're annoying, do it.
Right.
If they send me one thing, I just hit delete, just ignore them. And, I just think it's good to accumulate connections because the more connected you are, the more likely somebody important will want to connect with you.
Interesting. Well, as spoken like a man who plans to sell a book soon.
Absolutely.
So we've got the follow-up. So we had a question about how long should you wait to follow up? Is there an etiquette? And, my thought is follow up as soon as you can.
Absolutely.
If you go home that night, I'm always very impressed by people who get the notes off that same evening of an event.
I do that if it's a hot connection. In other words, it's that person who you spend 30 minutes with, or longer at the networking event, you have a connection with, then I have no problem. Otherwise, the next day is fine. More than 2 days, no good. So I would say 2 days is the max.
Okay, so Andres has got his answer then. So my next question with you, when you're having these conversations with people, and how much time do you spend, and are you conscious of finding the personal connection? It's like, Tim Souther and I, like we have this whole, we want to see all the bands before they die. We call it
we had that discussion at the. I saw you guys doing that. Yeah,
to me, that would that's just we bonded on that, and that's a conversation we can always continue whenever we see each other. And we almost never talk business. But I'm curious and particularly when you were at Unique, how quickly would you try to get to a business conversation, or in your case even? They're recreational. Were they into travel? Because if you knew they were into travel, they might be into photography.
That's right. I try to make the conversation personal immediately. People relate to personal conversations, business conversations. Ultimately, even though they're at a networking event, you're sitting in some pretty venue, they're drinking, they're talking. I think that if you don't establish a personal connection right away, it's hard to move forward with the business connection unless it is as almost 100% symbiotic.
Right.
Your receiver there, it's senders, the other, vice versa kind of thing. Right. Otherwise, without that personal connection, you kind of get lost and you don't establish a bond. So I always go there right away. It's right away.
Right. And so are they, you ask them whether they're married, where they grew up, and what's some of your personal questions?
I mean, it totally depends on, I usually like to work within the environment that we're in because, particularly with women, I mean, I'm being direct now. When you're going up to a woman, you don't want to be like, are you married? Right? It doesn't come out right.
The ring. Look for the ring.
Right. But that doesn't mean anything.
Okay.
we won't go there.
Okay, fine.
But you don't necessarily want to go there. You want to ask, I think a really good question is, how are you finding the event?
Right.
Did you meet anybody interesting? That's always an easy icebreaker.
Right.
If you see their badge and their company name is on it, ask them something about their company. People are always anxious to talk about that.
Now, while we're talking about badges, one of my pet peeves is that a lot of, at this event, they had badges on lanyards and only one-sided. And half the time you'd go up to someone and their badge was flipped the other way.
Flipped around.
And, it could get a little personal if you reached in and said, can I flip your badge so I can see who you are, so I can decide if I want to talk to you or not?
No, my favorite one is when the badges, and this is true for women, the badges are hanging on women and you're sitting there looking at their, at their chest. It's actually, you feel bad doing it. You're not supposed to, you're trying to see their name. It's a little bit weird.
I can see your remorse.
I'm broken up about it completely.
Now, and I know some people who actually have their own badge and they just take it to events because they know most of the badges are made The name is so small, and for those of us who need reading glasses, you can't see it.
Yes.
Anyway, they could really, networking event people could really help themselves by a couple of things. Big first name, two-sided badges.
I also think putting the company name or who you are on the badge is meaningful.
Right.
It's more meaningful than having the person's last name.
Right.
Just, if on my badge I wanted to say Matt and the name of my company, or what, I have multiple things that I could be there for, to have that. That's it.
Right. So, and one of the things that I do consciously as I'm meeting with folks at these things, particularly people who are younger, which is increasingly the case when you go to networking events, is I'm thinking in my mind, how can I help them? What is it that I can do for them? Are they really interesting, and could I write about them? Is there somebody I could introduce them to? Are they thinking about a career transition? Whenever you're in that mode of sort of giving to get, the conversations are always interesting, and you get somewhere faster, which
100%. I don't approach the conversation with what I want to get from them. I approach the conversation with what I could do for them.
Right.
That's really the way I go about it. I know I sound like I'm, patting myself on the back, but ultimately that's really the way you approach it. If you go that way, you'll always end up with a better networking environment than if you're one of those people you see them walking around the networking event. They go from person to person to person. They go, "Who are you? Oh, you're Drew. What are you? I'm not interested in you," and they move on.
Right. Yeah. No, don't like them.
That's not the way you network.
Yeah. That's why I have a special badge with a different badge and a different identity. Clark Kent. And feel free to talk to me if you want, if you dare. All right, so we've now covered the sort of how to get and start to build these relationships. How about maintaining them? I mean, we've put them into LinkedIn, but that doesn't do it. Do you have tiers where you say, okay, this person I really want to stay in contact with every month, and this every 6? Do you consciously think about staying in contact with people?
I think that's like any relationship. It will naturally evolve. I'm not interested in being a salesperson and sort of putting them in my tickler file and saying, oh, I have to get to them. And unless it's something specific, like I'm leaving the country for 3 months, I'm coming back. I mean, that doesn't happen very often. Normally what happens is if you connect with somebody, you connect on LinkedIn, you have some sort of common. I end up connecting with them further on social media. Like maybe I'll Facebook connect or Instagram, certainly Twitter. We'll email each other. And then I'm very, very meticulous about how I keep my email. I'm on Gmail, and I have literally hundreds of labels, and I will keep track of them, and I will keep a relationship going with them on one of those social medias. Like I've had relationships where I've met them. I thought we had some sort of a business connection. We connected on Facebook. We then became sort of internet friends, where we watched each other on Facebook and did that for a year or two. And then after a year or two, something happened, and we actually came back together and did some business. I've actually had that happen. So even if you can, and that's being true to the networking process, in that you're not always looking for something from somebody right now. You're trying to build your relationships, build your network, which doesn't mean that you always have to get something right away. And as that network builds, you find the people you can interact with. And over time, usually something good comes of it. Nothing bad can come of that.
Right. No,
and so that's how I build it. I don't like that mechanical process at all. I prefer to have it a more natural process, connect with them on as many media, as many platforms as possible, and engage them as human beings. And then, if something happens, it will.
It's funny. I mean, we just started working with a client that I literally met 5 years ago. Yeah. At a convention, we just talked. We were talking about things, and next thing you know, they're not next thing you know, 5 years later. But the connection had been made and maintained. I mean, I put out a newsletter once a month, and so at least once a month, people hear from me in one way or another. Let's talk about tools. You talked about Gmail. Do you use anything else, any software to help keep your relationships, your databases fresh and sorted, and anything else?
Okay, so I use a combination of a bunch of things. The first thing that's and most important to me is my actual contact list. And I'm on Gmail, so I'm using Google Calendar. I'm using Google Contacts. and Gmail all together. So I'll enter somebody in the Google contacts. I always get their email. I always get their mobile number. I'll connect with them on Google Plus because that a lot of times populates their picture, which helps me remember them. If I can, I try to find if they're important, I'll find their picture. And I like to keep notes. There's a notes field. I'll keep a little bit of notes in there. And if I have a calendar entry or something that I'm going to meet with them, then I invite everybody to calendar invites. Like, I appreciate for this, you sent me a calendar invite. And the good part about that is then if I go back and I search on you, I can see our whole interaction basically throughout history. And that's how I really keep track of it. On top of that, we're connected on Facebook. We're connected on Instagram. So I'm using our example of how we're connected. So we're following each other, and on Twitter. So we're following each other in multiple ways. Those are really the tools. I don't really add extra platforms in, and LinkedIn also. So if you look at it, you and I are connected on Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, through email, through calendar invites, and now on Blurb, or what is it? What are we on? Blab. Sorry. Blab.
I know. Did you follow me on Blab? Because I followed you.
I didn't, because I just logged on to Blab like 3 minutes before we got on.
You can see the little button above my name there. And you can click
on let's do it.
Yeah, so click on that. Now we're connected yet another way.
That's right. We are just like, we're almost married. So when you look at all of those tools, once again, I try not to be mechanical about it. So if I used, I don't know, like some business manager like Maximizer or Act or whatever, one of those things, I mean, I just don't see that as going to create a natural kind of interaction.
Right. Now, rumors of Google Plus just going away are pretty strong. You won't be affected by that at all, will you?
No. I mean, I assume that they're not going to delete people's profile pictures.
Right. Right. No, you'll still have that. Right.
Yeah, so I'm sure we'll still have that. I don't use, I mean, you know, when you hit the share button on your post, it's very easy to post on Google Plus. Right. And if I get a +5 on a post, it's time for a party. So it's not exactly, you know, going to affect my social media. I mean, on Facebook, I'm likely to get if things go well, I get a few hundred likes and comments. On LinkedIn, I can get tens of thousands of likes on my writing. So I'm not really affected so much by what goes on in the Google Plus world. I actually hope it does go away because, you know, it'll push more into the platforms where I'm strongest.
Yeah, it certainly doesn't affect our lives one way or another. All right, so I'm working with one platform I use to try to keep track of my social contacts that I find moderately helpful because it reminds me every month or two, depending on what I sort of designated, to get back in contact with people. Because as you say, your networks get so large and so complicated, it gets difficult to keep up with them. And then you keep adding to it. I mean, that's the challenge. All right, well, I think we've covered this pretty well. I'm trying to think of, we've covered the meeting part of it, the follow-up part of it, the staying connected.
You know, I'm sorry, Drew, let me just add one thing to that.
Oh, good, please.
And that's how you manage it. Remember, my belief is to let things go naturally. And you're not going to forget the contacts who you establish relationships. They will be in key spots. They'll be in your email inbox. They'll be in your calendar events. They'll be on Facebook. If you Facebook friend somebody and you interact with them, you continually see their posts. Right. And so if you're making your social media, just like you're networking, your way of life, anybody who's significant in your contact list of any kind will continue to show up in your face. So I don't really see it as a problem. I just let the relationships go where they're supposed to go. And that brings them in front of me by the way these social media platforms work.
Well, so Matt, your chapter in the CMO's periodic table is networking. As you know, you are on page 277. See, this is the table of contents, and we cover a lot of ground in it. That is what it's in the category of elements, inert fundamentals, because I believe that no great CMO can be without certain characteristics to succeed, whether it's showing courage or having passion, or always innovating. And I think network is in that area, along with sort of listening and learning, and then the notion of personal branding. And I'm talking about that, and I'm going to hold up this sign because I think we've covered networking really well, and I want to move on and talk about some of the other things that you have going in your lives. So let's talk about your whole dad, your approach to fatherhood, and your book, and your current passion.
This is one of those things. In a way, I'm glad I sold my business, and I started to work on this before I sold my business. As you know, I am a single dad of 5 children. I raised them from the time that they were little kids until they're now in their 20s. And when you have 5 kids in their 20s that you've been raising almost for 20 years on your own, sometimes you get a benefit from that, and that's really the experiences that I've learned. I always say that I was a child when I had children. I was a child when I was left with 5 children to raise on my own, and the end result is they raised me. Right. So I became an adult by raising my children. Of course, that happened too, but that's a minor. And
you may want to blame that on your mother's father more than you do your children.
That's right, and it just seems like that this has been my calling. I've been really quickly successful with my writing. I give a man's point of view on parenting and the experiences that you have in that. I write for the Good Men Project. I was actually just named one of their rising stars. I've had several of my articles actually best of site. They're a 5 million plus viewer a day site, one of the largest online properties for men and growing. I've had my articles on LinkedIn featured as best of the day several times in several categories. I don't know really where this came from. I was a math grad student. I did that so I didn't have to write anything, and somehow now I've ended up as a writer. I have a book which is sitting on an agent's desk right now as we speak, and the title of that book is going to be called Man Up: How I Made It as a Single Dad of 5. And it's really a combination of a memoir and talk about the things that I've learned and so on in my life. I'm really excited to get that book out. And what's really interesting is a lot of people think that I'm writing for other single dads. And of course, I am doing that. But it's funny, my biggest audience is actually women. And I think that women really appreciate seeing a man's emotional side, which they don't normally get to see. I talk a lot about the emotion of parenting and how grateful I am that what happened to me happened to me. It was the best thing ever. And, there's a lot of things that come out of my book, in particular, lessons in parenting, and in particular, a distinctly male approach to parenting, which right. I think that a lot of women can benefit from. But really, what I'm really hoping to do is really change the discussion on male parenting. Men, for the longest time, have been considered as the second parent. And that's really not the case. We're really capable parents too. But even more than that, and this is really the big story, is that if you had asked me when I was 18 years old, would I want to be the single dad of 5 children, I would have said, you're nuts. Right. In fact, when I had the kids to take care of, I thought I got a jail sentence. I was like, oh my gosh, I should run away. I'm going to raise these kids. I'd rather go off and, do something else. Right. But I did stick with it, fortunately, and I raised them. And as a result, I had the best possible life that I could have. The life that I have with my children now, the relationship I have with them, the things that I've learned, really ended up being the best life. And we're in a society now where, if you look at minority communities, I think like 80% of the children are born to single moms. Right. And if you really take a look at that, one of the reasons they do that is that the dads see fatherhood as a terrible responsibility. And if we could make them realize that fatherhood is not a terrible responsibility, it's the best thing that can happen to them, maybe some of those fathers will actually stick around. Not saying all of them will, but maybe a lot of them will. And so I'm hoping that my book will shed a light on how it's possible to raise 5 kids on your own and have an amazing life. That's really the big story of my book.
And, since we're friends on Facebook, I did happen to see a post by your daughter with the hashtag best dad ever. So at least one of the 5 is
exactly. What I did was I actually visited her in Washington, D.C. this weekend. I surprised her for her birthday.
Oh, that's cute.
I learned through the grapevine she was having a birthday party at some bar in Washington, D.C., a costume party.
Oh, fun. So what was your costume?
I went for the cheap costume one I didn't have to pay any money for, which was a New Jersey Devils uniform. I put a Devils jersey on and a hat on and walked in with a bunch of 20-year-olds crowding in a bar.
Yeah.
So I just surprised her, greeted her, and left, and then spent the next day with her, took her all over, movie and touring and dinner and lunch and ice cream and, you know, the whole bit.
Oh, good for you.
But you know, my 23-year-old daughter wants nothing more than to be with me. That makes me the luckiest man in the world. Not too many dads get to say that.
No, that's really true. You know, I think so. I have a son and a daughter, and my daughter went to an all-girls school, and they always had a father's breakfast, and the head of the school always would make us cry as she told the story of the important role of fathers. And there's this famous story of Margaret Thatcher as a little girl climbing up the ladder in the library, and the mother says, "Be careful, honey, be careful." And the father says, "Let her climb, let her climb." And so, you know, that was the role of the father and the balance of the mother bringing caution and the father bringing the sort of the bravery and the exploration and the willingness to sort of step out and you know, take on the world. And obviously, next thing you know, you have Margaret Thatcher. So that's all we needed to do. But I love that story, and it also, you know, every year we were reminded of the critical role that the fathers play. And this was in a case where we had great partners. I have a wonderful partner who's terrific, but I never forgot that my role was really important in this, that I had a role, and certainly appreciate it. But I can't imagine having done it by myself, and I can't imagine having to do it with 5.
That's why you have hair and I don't.
Yes.
No, I mean, my kids, I have to tell you, I am so lucky in that way. Through all of those years, my kids gave me so little. I mean, I didn't think of it like this back then, but in retrospect, my kids gave me so little problems. They were amazing children, and considering what they went through, their mother left them when they were little. I mean, that's what happened to them, and they could have certainly turned out, you know, differently. But they're all highly successful. They're all wonderful human beings, and you know, I'm like I said, I'm really, really blessed for that. And I think that one of the reasons that you actually take a look at things like that is I think society conditions us to think of men as second parents. But I can assure you that you performed as critical a role with your children, even if you wasn't in terms as much time with them. Maybe the mom spent more time with them, but your role is equally as critical. And that's I'm sure that's a huge contributing factor why your children have turned out great too.
They're actually lovely kids. We had our daughter's 25 now, and she stayed home the other night and just hung out with us. It was really cute.
So is there anything that you could have wanted in your life more than that?
No, absolutely not. No,
that's right. So fatherhood turned out to be a pretty good choice.
Yeah, that was. But I had, you know, that was not something that I went into lightly. It was something that I had always aspired to have, and was lucky enough to have a daughter and a son. I want to tell you another story that was at the time shocking, but be interested in your reaction to it. So I think when the girls were 12 or so, maybe 11 or 12, a psychologist, I don't know if she was a psychiatrist or psychologist, came in and just talked to the fathers of these 12-year-olds and basically said, "You are the only thing between your daughter and date rape. You are who defines her self-esteem. How you talk to her, when you say she's pretty, not, you know," and talked about how it's like when she's in her pajamas, not just when she's dressed up. We had all sorts of interesting, and she gave us a number of tips, including having the conversation and having it repeatedly. And it was, I just remember at 11 or 12, whenever we were instructed to do so, having a very embarrassed daughter and frankly an embarrassed father having this conversation. But it grew, you know, it was the right thing to do. And I'm curious how, as a single father, how you dealt with some of those tougher issues and the self-esteem and what kinds of things you did to help your daughters in that area.
I really love this topic because it really gets to the heart of what I talk about with parenting. And yes, obviously the psychologist is right. They're giving you a few techniques to employ to sort, and I think the best thing that comes out of that is that you're made aware. But I emphasize that this is a really important thing, is that what you say to your children ultimately has only a minimal effect.
Right.
It's really more how you conduct yourself. Right. So my children saw how I treated women that came into my life. Simply if it's the waitress at the restaurant, or it's somebody I was dating, or it's them. And right. From that example, from the respect that I showed to women, they learned that they were entitled to that level of respect too, and expected that. I'm going to tell you something really interesting that happened just this weekend that's really about that. My daughter, when I showed up at that birthday party, she was there with her boyfriend.
Right. Now,
there were probably 300 kids jammed into this bar, and they were not, this was a fire code violation of some monumental proportion. Every kid in there was drinking. You know which one boy in there was not drinking? Her boyfriend. And you know what's really fascinating about that? Is that I don't drink. So somehow my daughter, miraculously, I don't know, it's just maybe right. Total coincidence, ended up picking as it's a serious boyfriend too. They've been going out a few years. Somebody who doesn't drink.
Right.
So why do you think that there's some, of course there's a relation to that. And right. He came to that party. The boy's a medical student. He has his boards coming up. He came to the party. It's her birthday. He doesn't drink. So he's not standing there partying. He was carrying her purse, watching over her, and doing exactly like I did. So my daughter subconsciously picked a man who was just like her dad.
Right.
And that's ultimately the lesson that your children learn. You could sit there and have the talk and you can do all of that. But if you then leave the talk and then you don't treat women right, that talk is meaningless. Yeah. So I showed my children respect. I showed them every day that I thought they were beautiful in every way. It didn't matter, pajamas, that didn't matter. They got that from the way that I treated them. And so when they go out into the dating world, they expect respect from the men they're with. It's just a natural course of events. And so that's the way you instruct your children. I always laugh, my kids grew up in a very wealthy town here in New Jersey, in Short Hills, New Jersey. Yeah. And there was a big problem in town. I'm sorry, I don't mean to get stuck on drinking, but it was really interesting. There was a big alcohol problem in town where the kids were continuously drinking. And one of my friends is a pastor at one of the largest churches here, and he had a big meeting and everything. And I turned to him and I said, how many of those parents hold parties in their houses, where the adults come over and get drunk? What do you think the kids are going to do? So it's really the example you set in every aspect of your life that ultimately determines how your children are going to go out there. It's a fundamental tenet of parenting, and I think people get lost. They intellectually know the right thing, and they try to tell their kids, but they have to live the life too.
Right. Yeah. Walk this. You can't just talk the talk.
I was avoiding the cliche, but we know the cliche.
Yeah. So, Man Up, it's with an agent now. When are you hoping, and that's a proposal for the book?
That's a book proposal. But the book is mostly done. So assuming that I get a publishing deal for this, I would say we're 6 months away from a book, maybe 8 months, because that book will be finished within a month or two after we get the okay.
All right. Well, if the agent doesn't work out, because these days there are a lot of other options, so be sure to circle back with me on that, because a lot of publishers are dealing directly with the author.
Yeah, I know. We talked about this. I'm aiming big. The agent that my book is sitting on, she liked it at first pass, and she's a big agent. So we always aim for the stars, whatever. There's some cliche, and hopefully you won't hit the ground hard.
Yeah, no, it's that's actually from Leo Burnett. He said, if I reach for the stars, at least I won't come up with a handful of mud.
Right, exactly.
Which is a great thing. Well, Matt, I think we've covered a lot of ground here, and I don't see any questions from the floor. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring a wrap up to this. in the first part of it, we covered networking, and I think we did a really good job covering sort of how to approach it, give to get, getting to events early, working the room in a very positive, giving way, and then following up immediately and then with certain regularity. Then in the second part, we talked about Man Up, the Good Man, and you're writing with the Good Men Project, which I wish you the best of luck with. And I know I'll be talking to you soon because we network.
We do, for sure. Absolutely.
And so I appreciate it. And then just in case you were wondering, you can pre-order the CMO's periodic table. What's that?
I'm going to sign my own copy. Oh, no, wait, you have to sign the copy.
I will. I will sign your copy, and you can sign mine with your chapter.
There we go.
All right, well, Matt, I'm going to sign off now. I really appreciate you joining me, and we'll talk soon.
Drew, thanks for having me. It was a pleasure. It was fun talking to you.
Okay, take care.